Nonfiction paperback case. Where did the case itself come from? No one knows. It appeared in the night. An old man who may have been St. Joseph carved it. The wood has been tested and it's from hundreds of miles away from here. What? It's a miracle. And the old man was never seen again. Yeah, this thing's famous. Anyway, here's the second shelf. Zooming in. The first half of the second shelf. Looks like a variety of nonfiction things. I meant to read this book before seeing Oppenheimer. Before seeing Oppenheimer when that came out recently. But I've been to the Trinity site. I have a crazy history with the Trinity site now. Once I went there with my kids, and there was Trinitite all over. It's only open twice a year, the Trinity site of the first atomic bomb testing. When we went, there were protesters because there's a downwinder community around there. There's a family caught right in the blast that my friend Ty has written about extensively. Look up Ty Bannerman's writing on that family. What were they called? The Ratners. They were just in a little cabin back in a canyon right by there. And Ty and I made a couple of trips out there to find it. And he found it on another trip with someone else. But super interesting area. I'm kind of familiar with it. I've driven through it a lot. But when I was out at the site with my kids, I mean, think Oppenheimer, think Twin Peaks, The Return, Episode 8. We watched the footage of it on YouTube on my smartphone while we stood right there at the remaining foot of the tower. I'm like, this is a truly surreal modern experience we're having here. What? And there were signs coming in that said, don't worry, it's fine unless it's super windy. Not exactly like that, more formal. And it was so windy the whole time we were there. I was so paranoid. And my kids were young, and I'm like, their skulls are soft. We're all going to die. Ugh, the West. Read Canaries on the Rim by Chip Kidd. That's an excellent book about the downwinders in the West. I mean, St. George, Utah had something like 25 times the national rate of Down syndrome from Dirty Harry being tested near there and other bombs. Yeah, I mean, it did change the world forever. You know, and in America, it also created the infrastructure of secrecy that we live with now, and a government that's not accountable to the people. That's where all the spooks came from. It meant that people had never lied en masse to the public at that scale before from the government, you know? Maybe that Roosevelt was not in a wheelchair, but, you know, like, they built a whole town to, like, lie to people, the American people and everybody. I mean, for reasons. You don't want this dangerous technology getting in your enemy hands in a wartime situation. But nobody wanted to surrender that infrastructure of secrecy afterward. And the book Bomb Power by Gary Wills really makes this case. I mean, literally in 1947, the NSA went to Truman and they were like, you know too much. If we report you all the time, it would be a threat to national security. You could be kidnapped and tortured for that information, so we're not going to report you anymore. That's called a coup. That's like basically a secret branch of the government took over. I mean, the CIA is on the books for overthrowing somewhere around 200 foreign governments. That's like what we know about. It's not conspiratorial even just to be like, well, that's the world we live in now. Yeah, America has secret police. They have a few different agencies, and they're not all great all the time. And that's putting it mildly. If you go to Central America, you will not be a fan of the CIA and America's paranoid interventions and things like that. I mean, you know, Guatemala is like, let's do socialism. There's just a few rich plantation landowners that own everything. And they voted it in. Guatemala has very interesting elections. I was an election observer there one time. And anyway, the U.S. backed this guy, Rios Montt, who was this like tyrant, and he took over and killed 200,000 indigenous people and buried them in mass graves. And there's so many photos you can find of this guy shaking hands with Ronald Reagan, all chummy. Okay, we're in the nonfiction section, so it's going to get real sometimes, people. We're not just talking about feelings over here, you know. There's going to occasionally be politics and things that show my perspectives, I suppose. How can I avoid that, you know? But I will say this. I have friends who have all different sorts of beliefs and thoughts and perspectives on life, and my beliefs and perspectives have changed a lot in my life. And so I have to acknowledge that it's just okay to disagree and like have different perspectives or whatever. And we all seem to kind of be generally heading to the same place of like, accepting each other. I'm talking about like humans on the planet. I think I don't know, we're like, maybe, I feel like, I don't know. We haven't figured it out yet. How many generations have there been, I wonder, of humans? Well, I don't know. Sometimes I feel optimistic, but I don't know why it would be around this book. I guess there's something to be optimistic. We haven't destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons yet somehow, and they've existed for decades. So good job showing some restraint in humanity. Though they did so much testing, it's kind of like we had a third world war with 1,000 plus nukes. Yikes. The strontium makes my bones shiny. It's good. We've got it all in our milk. And bananas. I hear bananas often carry radiation. I mean, also that everything's relatively safe. I've met nuclear tourists. I can't, no, that's not me. Talk to these people. They're very nonchalant about it. They're like, oh, it's all a bunch of hype. It's not as bad as you think. You just have to watch the amount. And I'm like, ugh. That's so scary to me. Because like when I've done nuclear tourism, which was twice, the Trinity site and something else. What was it? I think it was handling some radioactive objects. But it's just a lasting paranoia. It really, it stays with you. It's not like a virus. It's something different. It's like, did that affect me? I don't know. You hope you'll get powers or something, but that never happens. It's just like new kinds of tumors that no one's ever heard of before. Oh, great. Communism. This is part of that series of all the different isms. I'm always like, I'm a communist sympathizer. Hopefully that won't get me killed. I'm like, I care about art more than activism, honestly. I have to admit that to myself. Because if I cared about activism more than art, I would be more of an activist and less of an artist. I feel like art is an activism of its own sort. But I am interested in how like revolutionary zeal and art can coexist too. But I'm a peaceful person, I'm part hippie. And I do think we could do better, and that there's more creative ways. And there's obviously happy countries that use various forms of socialism, etc., and even communism at times. And we've never really seen these systems get to operate unplagued by capitalism's depredations. So, we haven't really seen perfect models of any of this stuff ever. But, to each according to his need and from each according to their ability seems like a pretty beautiful thing to me, as long as you have relative freedom of mobility within that, capitalism ain't all roses, It's the big fish eating the small fish. And honestly, it's like kind of sad lately, seeing all the homeless people, etc. It feels like the system is failing, or like if this is not failing, then it's a pretty ugly system, But I find myself very moved and inspired by the writings of Karl Marx. He writes about this holy fire that's at the center of all of us, that I feel like it's language that all the artists that are digging the deepest, that I care about the most, seem to say something about it in the same way. I recognize we're talking about something big behind it all. But, and maybe that sounds quasi-religious or something like that, but yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe it's like the essence of who we are, this like brightness that we can make brighter by like being our best, I think. But Karl Marx talks about that language in beautiful poetic ways. I wanted to quote it in something. He wasn't just some like radical that came out of nowhere. Like, read about 1860s Russia, and you read about a place where everyone is just trying to figure out, what do we do? There was literally a novel, What Is to Be Done? Wait, was that what it was called? No. Yeah, I think that was what it was called. Chernyshevsky. What is to be done? Like, what are we going to do? Like, because, serfdom was going away. Tsarism was weakening or changing, opening up. It was kind of there. The end of the Soviet era had a similar name. Perestroika? I don't know. Yeah, anyway. I read all these things and then I forget them. It's crazy. I'm like, why do I even read? Like, I read so many books about like European politics once, and I read so many books about Korea, and I read all of these things, and then like I'm educated for like a few months, and then I forget it all. But I wish people weren't so afraid of communism and socialism, because if we all just talked about, the best possible systems for everybody in reasonable ways, it seems like we could just figure it all out, Like, I don't want some bloody thing to happen, I recognize that violence can have power and that the threat of violence is sometimes necessary. I sometimes think, would Martin Luther King have been successful if Malcolm X wasn't standing over there, like kind of offering another alternative, And mainstream white people were like, Martin Luther King. We'll go with his plan. Let's not nonviolence. Why did I bring up Martin Luther King? I grew up in a religion where the leader wrote a book about how Martin Luther King was a communist plant. So I definitely drifted away from all that. I'm like, wow, racist and close-minded, and I don't know. We could just really have an awesome world, I think, That's why it's good to read these books. I'm going to read all of these. I will at some point. I will. I love books like this. What is history? Nobody knows. A blank inside. Professor Carr has written the best recent book in English on the nature of historical study. This is probably way meta, There's a word for it, like, what is it? Historicity or something like that. What about the study of that and the study of that? You can keep going forever. Should you? No. Maybe, if it's interesting and weird. We do live in like a prismatic reality. Dream within a dream. The artificial within the natural, it's wild. Oh, this looks great. Looks a little bit pulp, maybe. But also probably well-researched and interesting. The Crime Confederation, for the first time, the real and shocking facts behind the fiction of The Godfather. Yeah, I bet Mario Puzo did a lot of research. It's a pretty good cover. Nice looking book. Oh, I'm so glad I own this. And look at this beautiful, like, matte copy of this. Pretty. Published by the New American Library. Well, you guys are great. This is not Mutiny on the Bounty. This is William Bligh's account of the mutiny on board HMS Bounty, the historical document. Oh, what a great story, Mutiny on the Bounty. So interesting. Why are historical events so interesting? It's wild. There's really like an amazing feeling that they can kind of induce. I get that from literature too. Sappho's poems, I'm like, whoa, time machine sometimes. But nonfiction documents, they're great, William Bligh, the Bounty's beleaguered master. He's such a villain in Mutiny on the Bounty, and then he's the hero of Men Against the Sea after that. Oh, you gotta own stuff like this. Early American views on Negro slavery. You just gotta know about wherever you live, and like explore all the questions and find out everything. What did people really think? What was it really like? This looks like a work of like anthropology almost. Interesting. I bet it includes a range. It's great. Let's just take it as an object. Well designed art. An uncompromising landmark study of the roots of a contemporary American crisis. A startling examination of the racial attitudes of our founding fathers. Whoa! Ugh. Yeah, I grew up Mormon, so I've got some Mormon books in here. This is not a by Mormons, for Mormons book. This is about this guy who was bombing people and killing them, who was Mormon. And story of the Mormon forger murders. He was this brilliant forger. He faked an Emily Dickinson poem, some other artful things. And then he faked the lost book of Lehi from the Book of Mormon. So the book that Joseph Smith claimed to have translated from ancient golden plates in the 1830s or something. He loaned the first chapter of it to Martin Harris, who was funding the publication of the book. And his wife was insistent upon it. She was like, this guy's a liar. And And then maybe she purposefully got rid of it so that Joseph Smith would have to be proven that he was a faker because he couldn't recreate it and people had seen it. So if he was really translating it divinely, he should be able to translate it exactly right. But he was like, God is saying we can't, we didn't have enough faith, so we don't get to have that chapter anymore. So that's the backstory. But so this guy, this bomber, I used to know his name. Is it Mark something? Mark Hoffman. He forged, this is my understanding of this. This is why I need to read this book. I think I did read it a long time ago. My parents were rebellious enough members that this was kicking around their house sometimes when I was a kid. But they kept it from us kids. They wouldn't let us read it. And my dad would like read Sunstone, which was like the edgy Mormon news magazine that you could get. Be like, women should get the priesthood. They'd run op-eds like that and stuff. So, and my parents were always, they're just great people. I reject the religion they raised me in. But this nonfiction section is making me regret doing this whole book project. I'm like, I don't want to talk about that stuff. Blah. If you grow up in being systemically lied to, or you feel that you were at some point in your life, it's a nasty feeling. It gets under your skin. But anyway, so this guy faked the Book of Lehi, and then to the Mormon Church's not credit, they bought it from him and hushed it up because it would have like exposed Joseph Smith as a fraud if it didn't match the other book. And so that happened. But apparently the truth started to leak out and blackmail became a thing. And then he started Unabombering all of his critics and doubters and blackmailers, I guess. Something like that. At this point, my description grows vague. Yeah, the church would sometimes do that. Like, this is a book about this guy who was a Mormon scholar, and he was basically hired to prove the archaeological reality of the Book of Mormon. And he completely like disproved it. And then the church just like took his results and they were like, thank you for your work. And then hid it in an archive. And this is a fascinating little tale. I think I read this one twice. Thomas Stewart Ferguson's Archaeological Search for the Book of Mormon. Very interesting. Got this a long time ago. Moving on. Oh, look at this beautiful book. Prehistory of Africa. What? I feel like I'm not filming this with justice here. It's just like, if you love a book, this is a good looking book. Some damage there, but let's not look at it. Whoa. East Africa. But this is so interesting. It would teach me a lot. I should read it. Photo section. Oh, cool. Meta Talk, Guide to Hidden Meanings in Conversation. Do you still love me? Of course I do. I don't know. What do they really mean? See back cover. Meta Talk. Do you know what it means when someone says to be perfectly frank? Let's see. Watch out, he's hiding something. Let me sleep on it. I was only trying to help. Do you still love me? Learn to read the hidden meanings in conversation with over 350 key phrases that give you the clue to what people are really thinking when they talk. The authors of the million-copy bestseller, How to Read a Person Like a Book. Like, doesn't this seem like this would benefit an author to read this? I think it would. Here's the one on capitalism. I don't think I have the socialism one. Shoot. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Their heads have melded together grotesquely. That's what capitalism does to you. Head melding. Oh, man, this book looks amazing. Looking Far West, The Search for the American West in History, Myth, and Literature. I have to read this, like, now. I think I forgot I even owned this. The West Without a West. Native Americans. The West is mythical topography. Thoreau Whitman. West is frontier, the mountain man. West is Promised Land. Oh, Bernard DeVoto gets a chapter. Burton. Huh. Conan Doyle. Huh. The Wild West. Emerson and Bret Hart. Huh. Bob Dylan. Second Frontier. Farmers, Miners, Militants. Beyond the West. Jack Kerouac. Huh. George O'Keeffe. The above names are but a sampling of the many voices in this extraordinary collection of writings about the American West as both a historical reality and a realm of the imagination. Here in song and story, myth and first-hand report, analysis, and eulogy is an anthology that gives full expression to the West and all its complex meanings. Cool. Like anything, it's a construct, but, it's a useful one in thinking about it. It is a unique realm of the West. More Loren Isley. I think this is his famous book. So what's his deal? It's a nice looking book. 70s, I'm guessing. But an 80s edition. Oh, I guess it was way off, unless this is a later edition. 59. Originally 1946. Whoa. Dr. Isley has written a work of true science which must surely take its place also as great literature. Also, I'm pretty sure I talked like for 3 minutes without the camera being on. That's great. Now, normally I would not hold on to a book in this condition. And in fact, I need to do some tape magic on this. I like to completely cover book covers like this in clear tape, and then the part that's missing just becomes invisible. And then they're solid, and you buy them some more years in circulation. Sure, they're kind of, forever changed, but how to win friends and influence people. Here's the thing, these weird old 50s books where people are like, here's some good advice. They're all right. Some of them really are good advice. I mean, some of it can feel a little phony in the way that it's posited, can feel a little phony, like 14 million copies sold. Dang. How to win friends and what? What? This book is in terrible shape. And anyway, like, people do like to hear their own names. Try to say people's names to them when you talk to them. If you can just like internalize that, like at least once, let people know you know who they are and stuff. Just some of it's good advice like that. But I only kept this because this was owned by my college GF, my first year in college when I was 18. She gave me this. 50 cents. I think it was beat up when she gave it to me. She's like, you should read this. What do you do to your books? Great person. One of those people that like shapes your life because you end up moving for them. Still a Facebook friend. Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson. Oh, hey, this is that one. Wow. Got a paperback. That's great. A man who would starve before he bartered away his independence and who was loved and honored by all who knew him. This is so famous. I mean, Boswell just like lived with Johnson and studied him, and for decades, and ended up writing this book that was also critical. He's also arrogant, eccentric, and lazy. I guess he has a brilliant mind. After all the years. It was Boswell, Dr. Johnson's great friend and admirer, who captured for posterity the many-sided personality of this literary giant in the life of Samuel Johnson, LLD. One of the great biographies of the English language. Yeah. I have not read it all, but I really enjoyed what I've read. Look at this awesome copy. You know what? This might have been my older sister, Leanne's. That's awesome. Yeah, I got a box of books from her after she sadly died. Yeah, because it was my dad's, adopted dad's, Charles L. Smith. He was born in 1896. By modern standards, this guy was horribly abusive, but my dad was like, that's just how they were. Refused to be traumatized by it. Of course, now he has dementia, so maybe that contributed? I don't know. Don't beat your kids. The Life of Samuel Johnson, James Boswell. Yeah, I have read parts of it, but it's just cool to read about other times, Everything you read, like, makes you bigger, One's mind, once expanded by a new thought, will never again retain its original dimensions. Oliver Wendell Holmes, something like I walked by an inspirational poster with that on it for a long time. When I worked at a for-profit college. Yeah. So that's that part of the shelf. But I wanted to just add a little coda to this video. Might as well. Nah, that's all for now. All right, to be continued. And, thanks for being out there, y'all. Yesterday I was all excited. 150 followers. Woo! Then there's 149. Somebody left. We lost one. I shed a single tear. But then it was 150 again. So they either came back or somebody else. I don't know. Life. It's a lot, My sister that I mentioned, this is a batik she made in India when she was 17. I think it's pretty good. It was water damaged by a flood. All right. Catch y'all tomorrow. Later.